Welcome back to the channel, guys. In this video, I want to talk about some of the changes and fixes within Diablo 2 Resurrected. And some of these have been mentioned before, and even go back to the early days of Diablo 2, like from 20 years ago. It's been a long time since, and I think it's time Blizzard started listening to the community on some of these and implementing them in the game. Especially now that I believe we're nearing the end of Season 4, and hopefully with the upcoming release of Season 5, it seems like the perfect time for Blizzard to actually implement some of these changes into the game. The currency stash tab is probably going to be the most desired thing on this list. Now, keep in mind the picture on screen is something that is an example of what it could look like, potentially. Now, I'm not saying that this should take up one of the current stash tabs, but instead have like a fifth one, a separate one. It could be a smaller button somewhere on the side that just kind of gives you access to this tab. We're at the point of the game where, like, if I'm having to make mules for like my runes, my gems, and stuff like that, like, I don't mind having mules. I get that there's limited stash, but I shouldn't have to make mules for stuff like that. It's to the point where it's like just a little bit too clunky. And again, 20 years ago is a bit of a different story, but we're also kind of moving into that age where like quality of life improvements do go a long way. And again, if let's say that they don't want to make a separate stash tab for the currency, just make it so that all of these items that are on display here can be stacked within your separate stash page. It doesn't have to stack in your inventory, obviously. Like, it'll take separate slots while you're looting and stuff like that, and that's fine. But as long as it at least stacks in your stash page, will go a long way to conserving space and making things a lot less clunkier in terms of like inventory and like stash management and so on. Next thing I want to talk about is going to be the loot filter. And this is something that Diablo 2 Resurrected very badly needs. Like, if it's getting to the point where there's so many drops on the ground that like things have dropped and aren't even visible unless like items are getting picked up, then that's a mechanical problem for the game. No point should loot be dropping that you can't even realistically see just because there's too many items on the ground. And honestly, the loot filter does need to be like very customizable just due to the nature of the game and how it works. And like, for example, let's say rare boots drop is that's something you want to see because they have a chance of being valuable items. Whereas rare chest pieces aren't as valuable. So for example, you can choose to like see rare boots, but you don't want to see rare armors. So you can like customize your loot filter in a way that you want certain items to show up and others just can be completely ignored. Another way to do this is, for example, gold can be automatically picked up. That's something where it's like, or at least like merged together in like one big pile if it drops within like a certain area. Just because it takes up so much space on the screen, especially if you're killing somewhere stuff like, let's say, cow level. You're killing like 30, 40 cows at once, and then all of a sudden, like, there's 30 gold piles. That just clutters your screen, and now there's drops that you might not be able to see, and they could be rare drops, such as like runes or like anything else really that like you're kind of looking for. So I definitely think a customizable loot filter is a great addition to the game, and it's something that absolutely needs to be put in as like a main priority. The Arcane Sanctuary Ghosts are known as one of the best mob types in order to get high rune drops, and the reason is because of their lower drop table. Now, my problem with this is in the Arcane Sanctuary, which is full of the ghost type mobs, and it's such a good farming spot. There's super chests at the end of the wrong ways. There's a summoner himself that also drops the Key of Hate. Very good farming spot. But it's super annoying when you have to wait for the ghosts, which are flying type mobs, to cross over the terrain, and if they're not on a part of the map where like you can be on as a person, their drops do not show up. So my idea for fixing this is whether they're killed off the map, on the map, to just have their drops show up at the nearest location on the map that's close to where the ghost died. It's super annoying because for range characters or like, for example, lightning sorcerers will like hit them off the map all the time and they won't get those drops. And if, for example, something valuable does drop, like a rune, then you're not going to get that rune because you killed it off the map. And even like while they fly close to the map, like your mercenary sometimes gets them or other stuff like that. And if they're like even a pixel off of like the area that you can step on physically in the game, then you don't get that drop. It's clunky, it's annoying. You have to like wait for them to get on the map and you're just sitting there like twiddling your thumbs and not doing anything. I think it's something that's a fair fix and should be put into the game where their drops just show up at the nearest location on the map that you can pick stuff up from close to where they died. Another thing I want fixed is the lag issues with failing to join game when trying to create a game. I guess it can be a little bit less cumbersome if you're doing like full Magic Find runs or stuff. Like once you're in game, it's fine. But the issue with the Blizzard servers, whenever you're trying to create a new game, happens a little bit too often. If you're doing something that's like a quick run of something, like for example, let's say Frigid Highlands is now a terrorized zone, and you want to do Eldritch Run. A run takes 15 seconds, 20 seconds, depending on your build speed, whatever, and then you go to recreate the game and all of a sudden it says fail to join game, which now takes 30 seconds. So in that time frame you could be doing pretty much two runs, and this happens way too often. Like sometimes the Blizzard servers are fine, it's not an issue, but in its entirety it happens way too often that I think it needs to be fixed. It needs to stop happening. It's very annoying when it doesn't. Sometimes it'll happen multiple times in a row. Like you'll try to create a game and it'll say fail to join game. You're waiting for 30 seconds trying to create that game. And then you go and you try it again and it fails a second time. So now you've wasted like a minute something of your time trying to create a game that through no fault of your own can be created just because Blizzard servers have issues. And the last thing on this list, I noticed something else people have been wanting for a long time, is a separate inventory for charms. And the way this would work is that your inventory page will always be your inventory page, and then you have a separate inventory page in which only charms can be put, and only charms in that specific page are activated towards your bonuses. And this will make looting a lot easier. Like for a game that is purely based on a loot grind style of game, the fact that you have very limited space to the point where like you fill your inventory with charms for your build to, be better, faster, blah blah, and then you have like the heraldic cube and that you stick in there just because it's slightly bigger space, and then you have to put an item in the cube, you have to open your inventory, you can't pick stuff up, can't like have multiple stuff that you want to like identify later. Arcane doesn't identify stuff that's in the cube. It just makes it a little bit less annoying if there's a separate page. That way you just have a normal inventory page for your loot that you can just pick stuff up. You want to identify it on the spot, you can. You don't have to open your inventory to pick it up and put it in the cube. Stuff like that. And along with this, I want to see large charms reworked. I can't say I have a good idea of what stats they could have to get it beneficial, but the problem with them is that grand charms are so good and they take that 3 vertical spaces, only leave space for like a small charm underneath it. And obviously grand charms, due to the fact that they give you bonuses to skill trees, will always be part of that game. But because of that, there's never any space to fit large charms into your build, which makes them like virtually useless. Like I'd love to be picking up large charms and identifying them, and like hopefully there'd be something crazy on them that like makes them a good roll, makes them valuable, makes them useful for trading, stuff like that. But as it stands, they currently have no place in the game, realistically. To the point where like if they're not gonna get reworked, I'd rather see them removed. Just they're never gonna be a best in slot. There's never gonna be any real value to them just because of the way the inventory works for charms. There's ultimately no space to put them in. That sucks, right? It's like why is it in the game if it's never going to be used for anything? And this isn't like, oh, it's a yellow item that like sucks or whatever. It's just there's literally no place for them in the game, along with like the grand charms and the small charms. So either rework them to make them useful, to make them like actually wanted in a build. They could give, I don't know, attack speed and some other stats that you don't normally see on charms, and then moving on from that, if that's not a possibility, just completely remove them from the game. And this is definitely like not the large charm itself, but the extra like inventory page for charms is something that people have been asking for a long time. I think it's definitely not something that should be put in the game. It'll be a huge quality of life for like looting and stuff like that. Just make things a lot easier and a lot less clunky. That is going to be it for my top 5 changes for Diablo 2. There's definitely plenty of other good changes that could happen, as well as let me know in the comments changes that you would like to see come to Diablo 2 Resurrected. And make sure to hit that subscribe button for more Diablo 2 content. As always, my social media information will be in the video description below. If you want to reach me, I'll always try to get back to you as soon as possible. That's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.